Here are 6 things I wish I had known to check in my own work before hiring a developmental editor. My name is Rebecca. I am the developmental editor with Heartbound Editing, and I am here today to share some mindset tips, some practical macro self-editing steps to take in preparing your manuscript to get a professional developmental edit done on it, and a bonus author career tip at the end. I'd hoped to do this with a fancier background and better equipment, but my part of the country is currently without power and has been since Wednesday night, and me and the cats are sheltering in a friend's house with very spotty reception of any kind. So, here's to the best laid plans going astray and making the most of what we have to work with, both of which are central concepts of macro editing. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimers first, there are very few hard and fast rules to writing, but everything I'm going to go over are almost universally considered to be best practices in fiction. Some of the things I will mention will be things you are already nailing, whether you know it or not, and there are also going to definitely be things I don't mention that are big problems in your story, since the 30 or so points that I'm going to be covering over this 6-day video and webinar series is less than 1/10 of all of the story elements that I personally check in a full developmental edit for any of my clients. In this series, I am aiming to spare you the months of time and probably a few $1,000s of wasting a developmental edit on the easy stuff that you could do yourself and needing to get another full developmental edit after the first one. I am not trying to spare you the tens of thousands and years of time and effort and investment that it takes to actually learn and practice all of this macro editing world. So, that being said, even the pros need a fresh set of eyes, which is part of why you get developmental edit or beta readers or whatever you can do. All right, diving in. So the first mindset tip is to try to get your approach to your own writing shifted over to editing. I've heard this described as putting on your editor hat or letting go of the writer and becoming the editor for your own work. It all means the same thing. It takes a different approach, a different way of thinking about your own writing to edit it than it took to outline it if you're a plotter or to draft it. So do whatever you need to do to get your headspace there, whether that is pep talks for yourself or from a loved one, whether that is planning out the rewards that you're going to give yourself when you hit certain milestones, or even doing a day of rejection therapy, which is where you go out and you aim to just get told no by as many people as possible in a given day. Whatever it takes to get you to where you can accept criticism on this deeply personal creative work that you've just finished, whether it's from yourself internally or from others. All stories need work, every single one. And however amazing the potential of your story is, it's not going to be the exception to that rule. If you can get to a place where you are taking feedback as a fantastic opportunity to make your story even better than it was before, rather than feeling hurt that your story isn't already perfect, it's going to do wonders for your ability to edit productively. Mindset number 2 is let it rest. Let the manuscript sit untouched for at least a couple of days, if not a week or a month, whatever amount of time that you need to let it rest, step away from it, and gather your thoughts without constantly tweaking. This is in part just so that you can come back to it with fresh eyes, and in part so that you can let your subconscious kind of percolate those big story elements and figure out what approach you need to bring to the story from that big global concept sort of headspace. By all means, if you have ideas about the manuscript, about something you didn't get right in drafting, something you want to edit, write those ideas down, but write them down in a separate document. Do not touch your manuscript while you are letting it sit. That is an absolutely vital step of the self-editing process that just about everyone you meet is going to recommend. And mindset number 3 is do some preparative research. Research your genres, your subgenres, and your tropes to make sure that you're really going to deliver what you set out to deliver and satisfy the readers of those genres, subgenres, and tropes. This is huge. Research the time period or technological level of your story, if that's applicable, especially for historical or swords and sorcery fantasy or steampunk or whatever you've got going on. Research any elements of your world building or your character plots, your society that need that little bit of extra research. And research what other indie authors in your genre are doing that's really working for them. Or if you want to go the traditional route, research what agents and publishers are currently looking for or whatever requirements they might have for submission and query. All of this is just to help you have a much more specific and concrete goal for your editing. It's important to have a goal of, I want to meet these genre requirements. I want to meet these really fun trope emotions, whatever you're writing. You want to have a more concrete goal for what you want to accomplish through your macro editing than simply make it better. That's what all of the research is for. With all of that out of the way, here are the first 6 steps which I suggest you take once you return to your manuscript and are ready to edit. These are all questions for you to ask yourself and answer honestly on the page through the story and how you tell it. The cats are in the way. First, am I in one consistent tense throughout my story? That is past tense, present tense, or future tense, roughly in that order for how often they're seen in fiction. And are there any wobbles around that I need to fix? Now, you can use different tenses at different points in the story to denote certain things, but I highly recommend making sure that if and when you stray from your main tense, it is very intentional and used very consistently. Second macro self-editing point is that tense that I have chosen the best choice for telling my story? Do I want to experiment with a different tense choice by rewriting my first chapter in a breakout document and seeing how that shifts the reader experience of it? When you have an answer, just make sure that you consistently maintain that past, present, or future tense all the way through your manuscript. Third point is, am I in one consistent person, that is first person, second person, or third person, throughout my manuscript? Are there any wobbles around that I need to change? And like with tense, if there are any places where I am breaking which person I am in, am I doing so intentionally and consistently for that narrow purpose? Fourth point is making sure that your person choice is the right choice for your story, for this story. And again, do you want to try taking one of your chapters and rewriting it in a separate document using the different person? And if you're not familiar, like first person would be, I went to the grocery store. Third person is, she went to the grocery store. Things like that. And just making sure that you're telling this story from the right perspective, the right person for what you want the reader to glean from it. Point number 5 is, am I head hopping anywhere? Head hopping is when the experience of the story for the reader is coming through one person's eyes. So you have, your protagonist and you're seeing the world through their eyes. You are experiencing what they experience. You are observing what they observe. Head hopping is when that understanding of who the reader avatar is, who the reader is experiencing the story through, hops from different characters to different characters. That can often be very jarring for a reader, and it can pull them out of the story because they get confused, or it feels like they can't really focus on the story because there's too much shifting going around. So you want to make sure that you are in one consistent POV for each chapter or scene, which is either broken by the end of a chapter and the beginning of another one, or a scene break. Those are both places where a reader is prepared for a shift in POV to happen, point of view. So Make sure that you have chapter breaks or scene breaks dividing each section where you're experiencing the story through one person's perspective. And if you're going to break that rule, if you want to try omniscient, I suggest that you wait to do that until you are a more experienced author, as it is hard to do well. And for now, if you're a newer author, really make sure that you are consistent in your point of view in each scene and each chapter, and if applicable, across the whole book. So, point number 6 is, have I filled in everything that I said I would come back to later? All of us leave points in our manuscripts where you just haven't figured out that character name yet, or you haven't figured out how you want to describe the clothing or the building or whatever it is. Maybe you have whole scenes that you said you'd come back to and fill in later. This is wildly important to get done before you hand it off to a developmental editor. A developmental editor has to be able to see the entire story in order to understand how it all fits together. We are very, very much looking at the holistic story. So if there are gaps, that's a problem. We can't help you. We can't edit a blank space, essentially. And for the littler stuff, I said I would come back and fill in this name later, things like that. It's just a layer of professionalism that you want to try to meet on your own before handing it off to an editor, so that they don't get caught by those little things and can instead keep their attention and energy focused on that big picture elements. I personally recommend that you use some specific character or wording or marker when you're drafting to mark where you intend to come back to. Some of the common markers are TK. I don't actually know what that stands for. I should look that up. I'm just aware that people use that. I will use either an asterisk or a pound sign. Some people use underscores or parentheses or brackets or wording like come back to or fill in later or the like. So whatever you think you may have used, do a find and replace. Search that symbol or that term and make sure that you have filled all of that in before you ask someone else to read your piece. So that's it for today for the macro self-editing advice. Depending on how much free time you have, how big your story is, and how quickly you work, it could take a few hours of effort to check and implement any needed changes, or it may take several weeks. Whatever the answer is, just do your best and do it however works for you to implement these changes. The one last bonus tip for this video is, if you want to move fast in your editing, or if you are like me and work best to a deadline, establish those with some sort of external accountability now. Do it now while your manuscript is resting, or while you're starting to find where you need to make fixes and make plans for fixing them. Do that now. This is applicable whether or not your external accountability is your friend who you said can read the story when you're done, or if you want to get beta readers or a critique swap group or a developmental editor. A lot of these options are going to be booked out months in advance. You want to make sure that you have a spot on a calendar, especially if this is a paid professional, well in advance, so that you know that their timing, their availability to help you is going to line up with when you're going to be ready for that help. Again, I am Rebecca of Heartbound Editing, that is H-A-R-T like the female deer, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you will follow along with the rest of this series and share this with any other authors who want to make sure that they too get the most they can out of a developmental edit the first time.